All right, I'm just going to go through the answers to these. I already have them done. I just want to explain some of them in case you had some issues with any of them. So basically on the quiz, you're going to have to graph. All I really need to see really is what quadrant you're in. So when you see 150 degrees, you can graph 150 degrees, and you can graph a radius of 3. And it's a dot that you're putting in the second quadrant. With 2, the angle was 200 degrees, which puts you over here with a reference angle of 20 here, but you have to go -2, so you go opposite direction. So you still have that reference angle of 20, but now that dot is in the first quadrant. And then for number 3, you draw the angle -12 pi over 11, which puts you in the second quadrant with a reference angle of pi over 11, but now you're going in the opposite direction 1 unit, so that reference angle is still pi over 11. Okay, so those are just going to be worth 1 point, just to make sure that you can do graphing. All right, so looking at converting. So when you go to convert, when it's in rectangular form, draw the picture. Once you draw the picture, here's the picture. I found out r was 2 and theta was 4 pi over 3. So then in polar form, it's 2 times the cosine of that angle plus I sine of that angle. In exponential, it's 2 times e raised to that angle times I. Make sure you include the I in that. All right, number 5, you can easily put it in exponential form, but to get it into rectangular form, all you really need to think about is taking 2 times the cosine of 11 pi over 6, and for the imaginary part, taking 2 times the sine of 11 pi over 6. And so when you do that, I showed you what you got for the cosine and the sine. Simplifying that, you get radical 3 minus 1i. Number 6, with number 6 you have 5e to the -5 pi over 6. So in polar form, that just converts to 5 cosine of -5 pi over 6 plus I sine of -5 pi over 6. So you easily can go between these two forms. But again, to get to rectangular form, you're really going to take 5 times the cosine of -5 pi over 6. That'll get you the real part, which I did right here. And 5 times the sine of -5 pi over 6 will get you the imaginary part. And I'm just thinking about -5 pi over 6. I think this should be a negative, right? -5 pi over 6 is right here. So it should have a negative sine, cosine, and a negative sine. So that would be a negative for that. Okay, so these two forms are easy to go between. When you're in polar form, to go to rectangular, just think about distributing. 5 times the cosine of my angle will get the real part. 5 times the sine of my angle will get the imaginary part. Okay, when you're given rectangular and you have to go to polar and exponential, you need to draw the picture. Find the radius and then think about what's the cosine of your angle and the sine of your angle so you can figure out what theta is. All right, on the next page. I did not put anything like 7, 8, and 9 on the quiz, but I think it's something you should be able to do, so try it. You won't have your calculator on the quiz, but again, you would just draw your picture, but now you would use your calculator to get a decimal approximation for r. It did say you were supposed to be in degrees, so if you have to take theta equals inverse tan, and you get your degrees of -59 is what the calculator gives you. That's down here. But you do need to know you have to add that 180 degrees. So that's where that came from. It was inverse tan of -5/3, but I had to add the 180 degrees. Now the one thing you do have to be aware of is that if I tell you to put it in exponential, that has to be in radians. So I still have my 5.8 radius, but now I have to convert that to radians. So all I really did is I just went back and went inverse tan of -5/3, had my calculator in radian mode, and then I added pi. So I got 2.1. That's the number of radians. Okay, so if you're in degrees, you add 180 to get to that next quadrant. If you're in radians, you add pi to go from what the calculator gives you to get you in the second quadrant. 8, you just need, one thing I wanted to point out with 8 is that is not really in polar form because that's a -7, and in polar form your radius is always positive. So when you draw the picture, you're at 110 degrees, but -7. So you're really down here. So really, this becomes 7 times the cosine of negative 70 plus I sine of negative 70. That's really what it is in polar form. So if you distribute, if you take negative 7 times this to get it into the real part and the imaginary part, this is what I got. To put it into exponential, because again I have to think about 70 degrees, negative 70 degrees down here, so my radius is 7. So it's 7e to the, now negative 70 degrees I converted to radians, and I got negative 1.2. I just used my calculator. I was in degree mode, and I hit negative, or in radian mode, excuse me, and hit negative 70 and put the degree sign in there, and when I hit enter I got my number of radians. So that's kind of a review of doing that. And then 9 is pretty similar to that. Those are the two answers to 9. I did not put any of those calculator problems on the quiz. All right, numbers 10 and 11 are on the quiz without a calculator. So once I give you the equation, no matter which form, whether it's in polar or rectangular, you need to know how to find the power. So if it's already in polar, you just take 2 to the 4th, which I did, was 16. And then I take my angle, 5 pi over 16, and I multiply it by 4. I got 5 pi over 4. So it did say that these have to be in rectangular form. So I need to take 16 times the cosine of 5 pi over 4 and 16 times the sine of 5 pi over 4 and simplify it. So I did that over here, and then when I simplify it, I got that as my final answer. Now I wrote it as negative 8I radical 2. I just want to make sure that you know that I is not under the radical sign. So if you go 8 radical 2I, just make sure your I is not underneath that radical sign. Okay, and then 11. If you draw your picture, you get r is the square root of 162, and theta is pi over 4. So again, you raise it to the 6th power, so you're going to take your radius, raise it to the 6th, so that's 162 to the 3rd. You're going to take your angle and multiply it by 6, so you end up getting 3 pi over 2. Then you have to distribute. Cosine of 3 pi over 2 is 0, so that goes away. There's no real part. The imaginary part then, that's negative 1, so it's negative 1 times 162 raised to the 3rd. That's a big number, so I wouldn't write what that is, and times I. So all you're doing is kind of distributing that 162 to the 3rd. Okay, so that's raising to a power. And just always be careful of what form I tell you it has to be in, because that could change on the test. So on 12, you have to multiply, so get it in polar form, that one is, or exponential, that one is. This one is not, so 5I is up here. My radius is 5 and my angle. So I wrote W in exponential form. Then when I multiply these, I just multiply the radii. I get 10. I add the angles, and I got 3 pi over 4. It says it has to be in polar form. And then to divide, I take z, the radius here, divided by 5, so 2 divided by 5, and then I subtract the angles. And I got that for an answer in polar form. All right, number 13. 13, I had to convert both of these to polar form. Actually, I did exponential. There's z and there's w, so you kind of double check your work to make sure that makes sense. So when I have to multiply, I'm going to multiply the radii and add the angles. When I divide, I'm going to divide and subtract. Now when I divide, down here you'll notice I took 8 divided by radical 2. I had to rationalize the denominator. So that's where the 4 radical 2 came from. 8 over radical 2, rationalize the denominator, the 2 cancels with the 8 to give me 4. So that's where that came from. So those were my two answers here. When I multiplied the radii, I added the angles, I divided the radii and simplified, and subtracted the angles. Okay, and then quickly on the last page, first you have to get this z to the 5th in polar form, so that's what z to the 5th is. And then I need to take the 5th root of 2 of my radius, so that's what you see here for all 5 of my answers, 2 to the 1/5. And then I need to take, for my first angle, take that and divide it by 5. So 7 pi over 6 divided by 5 is 7 pi over 30. And then I had to add 2 pi over 5. It's always adding 2 pi over n, which when I converted it to 30 is 12 pi over 30. So I just had to keep adding 12 pi over 30, 12 pi over 30, 12 pi over 30. Once I get to this one, it simplifies. Okay? All right, so that's that one. And then z to the 3rd, here that one is, here's negative 8i is here, so the angle is negative pi over 2, and my radius is 8. So My first is going to be the cubed root of 8, which is 2. It's for the radius of all those. I'm going to take negative pi over 2, my original angle, and I'm going to divide it by 3 because I'm taking the cubed root, so I get negative pi over 6. I'm going to keep adding 2 pi divided by 3, which is 4 pi over 6. So if I add 4 pi over 6, I get 3 pi over 6. It reduces. And if I take that and add another 4 pi over 6, I get 7 pi over 6. So my 3 answers are there. Okay, so I know it was kind of quick to go through those, but I just want to talk through where I came up with those numbers if you needed that. Quiz is tomorrow, so make sure you study.